Hey everybody, it's Mike. Welcome back to the Z Motorsports Shopping Channel. In this video we're going to be replacing the oil cooler on a 2002 Duramax LB7 that has a coolant leak at the oil cooler. Now we could just go ahead and tear it apart, replace the seals and gaskets, which generally fail on these, or we could upgrade it. So we're going to go ahead and put the L5P Duramax cooler on the LB7. It's physically larger, it has more cooling plates in it. I believe the LB7 has 11 cooling fins, and I think the L5P has 19. So it's like about a 31% increase in cooling efficiency. However, it is quite a bit larger, and I'll show you some comparisons here when we get it out. But we're gonna go ahead and get this on the rack and see what we're contending with. Not bad. It's got pushing 300,000 miles for a 21-year-old truck, so it's just barely starting to leak a little bit of coolant, so we're going to get on top of this before it gets any worse. All right, so this is the Banks kit. It's part number 13252. It fits 2001 through 2019 Duramaxes. What it uses the L5P cooler and oil filter cooler, which I believe is a 19 plate. The LB7 and LBZ I believe is a 13 plate, and I believe the LMM and LML, they went to a 15 plate. So this has got about 30% better cooling, according to Banks, over the LB7 and LBZ cooler. There is some modifications need to be done to the exhaust manifold and heat shield. The little boss needs to be ground off, but for the most part, this is the kit. So it comes with a GM L5P cooler, Baldwin filter, the new elbow that goes over to the bell housing, the gaskets, fasteners, for the gasket for the where it meets up against the back of the water pump, as well as the O-ring. So it comes all as a kit. All right, so anytime I'm working on one of these, I like to check the integrity of the intercooler system. So I pull the hose here off of the turbo, so I'm just putting my adapter into the hot pipe, and then I'll go ahead and connect air. Go ahead and put a little bit of pressure into it and see if it holds. There's about 10 PSI. On these LB7s, they seem to rub over on the exhaust manifold right down just above the frame. So that's a good place to check these. This one's holding well. Generally, you can see them fall off about a pound per second, and this one's holding really well. So this is testing the hot pipe, the intercooler, the cold pipe back to the turbo, and it's holding really well. So I'm going to run it up a little bit more, put it up to about maybe 20, 25, see what she does. Yeah, she's dropping off just about a pound per second or so. And I don't hear anything. If you do start hearing, I've seen these bad enough to where they won't even build pressure, or they'll build very little, and you can hear an audible sound of where they're leaking from. If you can hear them and go right to them, great. If not, sometimes you got to go around with a bottle of soapy water at your connections and stuff. And generally, that's what I found, is it's a connection either down on the passenger side where the cold pipe comes off of the intercooler coming up to the turbo, or it's down at the lower by the frame where the hot pipe connects to the intercooler. So this looks to be in good shape. There was no complaints of low performance or excessive black smoke or anything. So we'll go ahead and proceed from this point, seeing as how everything's good. Okay, once you undo the hot pipe from the top side, you can go ahead and snake it down and out. Or attempt to. Around the brake line and power steering lines there. Kind of have to twist and pull as it's coming out. There you go. This is the spot I was talking about on these LB7s, where it sits right up against the forward bank bolt for the exhaust manifold. So this has got a nice little recess in it, so we'll probably weld that up before it goes back together, but it was not leaking. But this is a common spot on these LB7s. Okay, so I've drained the oil now, put a new sealing washer back on the drain plug, torqued it back into 62 foot-pounds. I've removed the drive shaft and bungeed it over here to the torsion bar out of the way so it doesn't fall and bonk me in the noggin. And I've got the oil filter removed. I've just got a rag stuffed up in there for the time being. I'm going to go ahead and unbolt. There's 2 bolts here on the driver's side of the differential and 2 on a strap over on the passenger side that I'm going to undo and lower. See if I can lower this differential down just a little bit to give us a little bit more clearance, because that new cooler is quite a substantial amount bigger. All right, so we drop the little cross member. It comes underneath the oil pan here. There's a bolt right here, the back of the differential, right underneath the pinion. And there's another one just in front of it, up above. Pull those 2 bolts out, and then over on the passenger side of the front axle, there's a saddle cast into the housing with 2 studs coming down through. Pull those out, and then the front differential is loose, and we can go ahead and lower the front axle down and hopefully give us just enough extra room over here for the cooler. And that's about it. Only went down maybe an inch and a quarter because it hits the webbing on the differential, but hopefully that'll be enough to give us a little bit more room to get that. I'm not so worried about getting the old cooler out as I am the new larger one in. All right, so we've got the cooler loose. It's pulled away from the block. We've got the elbow out. So it's just kind of flopping in there right now. We've got the tube. We have 1 fastener still in the tube, so we're going to go up and drive the cooler back off of that tube right now. Let's go over to the bench and we'll show you what we found as far as where the failure point was. So here's the elbow. This goes to the block like that. This goes to the cooler. It was leaking down off this lower bolt right here. And so when we was able to get this down, bingo, you can see right here where the gasket's just kind of eating away, folded over. So that's where our leak was coming from and coming down onto this lower bolt. The top part was fairly dry, but it was this lower corner that was the culprit. So we'll go ahead and get the rest of this out of here now and let it drain out. So while we get the new one ready to put in. Okay, so here's the part where you need to modify the exhaust manifold. The heat shield right here, I just took a die grinder and cut the mount off after I took the bolt out. I'll go ahead in and radius this, and then this boss needs to be cut off. All right, there's the boss cut off. I just took a die grinder and went in. I just need to clean it up just a little bit and then radius the heat shield here, and we're ready for a test fit. All right, so there's the oil cooler mount cleaned, the coolant block cleaned, the studs removed, ready to accept the new fasteners. So we'll go get the tube ready, stick the tube up in place, and then put the cooler in. So I've got the tube, got the old O-ring removed, which it wasn't in too bad a shape, but I got the old O-ring removed. The pipe, the tubing all cleaned. I took some emery and knocked off any burrs on this end, so it's ready to accept the new gasket. And I've got the O-ring ready for this end. When you're putting these on, you want to be careful so you don't cut them, for starters, but also I like to put them on And then I will actually run a tool, a pick or something around a couple of times, basically to relax the O-ring in the groove and make sure it's not twisted in the groove. Then once you get to that point, then take some Sil Glide and apply some Sil Glide around the O-ring. Then I will put some in the bore of the oil cooler that this fits into, as well as on the other software, gasket seals, whatever you want to call it, for the rubber parts on the cooler. So there's the tube ready to go on, and then the same thing on the neck. I'll put a little bit around that. The main thing on this is I like to put it on there so as you're positioning this and rocking it around, get it into position, if it's dry, it's more likely to drag or catch on the engine block somewhere and roll this gasket, and then you got a leak. So by putting a little bit of Sil Glide grease, I use Sil Glide, but I've been using that for 35 years now, but just put some around each of the gaskets. Inside the bore of the cooler. All right, so just add a little bit of blue Loctite to the fasteners. You're going to want to use the 40 millimeter and the 340 millimeter and the 220 millimeter for the oil cooler, and then the other 5, I think these are 30 millimeter. These ones will be used to hold the elbow onto the cooler and the block. All right, let's go ahead and stab this in there. There's no easy way to get this up in there. You just kind of have to touch us with it. Okay, raise up on those lines like you did earlier. Okay, I should be pretty close to aligned there. Can you guide the tube into the casting? Yes, I'm lined up. Lined up? Yep. Okay, I just push. It's on? Yep. Okay. Awesome. Okay. All right, so just leave it laying right there for the time being. Let's go ahead and snake the elbow up in there and get it started. Again, there's no easy way. You kind of have to put it up in, rotate it, work the yoke around, and get it on the tube going up to the water pump, and then get it ready to be in position up onto the block. Now we'll go ahead and set the elbow in place and start a couple fasteners there. Okay, go ahead and torque these. Once I got them snugged up, torque them to 18 foot-pounds. Not a lot of throw up in there. Okay. And let's get a longer extension. That upper one. Okay, all those are torqued down there. Now we'll move up front to the tube. All right, so once we got the cooler mounted to the block at the back, it left a little bit of a gap up here where the coolant tube mounts to the back of the water pump. So we slipped the gasket in there, put the studs in, tightened the studs in, and then I use a torque adapter on a torque wrench. These have to be torqued to 80 inch-pounds. And if you keep it at 90 degrees, which this will fit up under the backside, it takes a little bit of finessing, but you can get that up underneath the backside. And if you keep the torque adapter at 90 degrees, like so, there's no modification to the calculation. All right, so I've got the airlift hooked up to the coolant tank, or coolant reservoir, the surge tank. The overflow hose, I just have it folded back and clamped off. You'll want to make sure and cap that off, because otherwise you won't be able to pull a very good vacuum and use any indications. So then I'll go ahead and open it up. We'll pull a vacuum down on it. I like this because you can check the leaks without having to waste coolant. So it's pulling all the hoses flat. Usually we'll pull it down to, good altitude, and it'll pull it down to a good 23, 24. This is vacuum. I'm going to stall that a little bit around 17. Oh, there it goes. Let's have an air pocket. It's pulling out. So now it's at 22. And I'm going to get a little bit more out of it. Shut it off, walk away from it for 10 minutes or so, and see if it'll hold. If it will, we'll go ahead and switch the adapters and draw coolant into it. And you know, use that oil and put the bottom end back together. Yeah, that's about all I'm going to get right there. That's 23.5, 24. That's about it. Shut her off right there for the time being. Okay, I'll walk away from it, go do something else for a few minutes. We pulled the vacuum on the cooling system. We've got the proper amount of coolant in it, sucked it all back in. We are now going to take and roll this differential back up into position, get the oil cleaned off of it that spilled, and then put the oil filter on and button up things down here. So there's no leaks at all. I pulled the vacuum on it, let it sit for a good 15-20 minutes, and nothing crept up on the gauge, so it held a good vacuum. Okay, so the axle's back in place. So you've got on the passenger side, you have a bolt there and there on each side of that saddle. And then over here on the driver's side, above the differential, you've got a bolt right there that goes through. And then behind, down on the bottom where the suspension mounts, you've got one right here that goes through, and that'll secure the axle back in place. And there's not a lot of clearance with this larger oil cooler. There's not a lot of clearance between the yoke and the oil cooler there, but so that's normal. The oil filter's back on, so we just have to put this cross member that goes across here back on now. We've got the hot pipe back installed. We'll go up top and pressurize it, make sure we don't have any leaks in the intercooler system. And then other than that, then it's the inner fender and tire, and we're done. Okay, so now we've connected the Kent Moore pressure tester to the hot pipe. We're going to go ahead and hook up the gauge. And then we'll connect our air to it. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and put some pressure into it. building quite quickly, so that's a good sign. Sometimes I've seen these leak where you can't even build more than a few pounds of pressure. So I'll usually put it up to about 10 or so, 10, 12.
Found a leak.
Shut it off, and basically, you hear that? We got a leak.
Yep, boot's cracked.
So we've got a cracked boot. And that was only with about 12 pounds of pressure, so we're gonna need a new boot.
Yep.
But anyway, that's how you test it. You run these up. Don't go generally over about 25 pounds of boost. I'll usually run up to 10, try it around 10, 12. If it's holding good there, then I'll run up a little higher, and you can usually let them drop about a pound a second is usually about normal. All right, so we did end up finding a little tear, right? It was kind of halfway under the clamp. So it's a good thing we tested the intercooler system. That's why I like to test them before a repair and after a repair. So we've got the new, got the new boot, picked it up from the dealership just now and just installed it. So tested out good. We're putting the inner fender back in and buttoning it up. All right, well, that pretty much concludes. We just got back from road test and checking everything out, so it's running good. Pulled a vacuum on the cooling system, filled it up, double checked the pressure after we replaced that boot that had the slight tear in it, and the intercooler system is testing good. So it's another one done, so I appreciate you following along.